The NHL holiday roster freeze kicks in less than 2 days, December the 19th at midnight. In today's video, we're going to discuss the top 5 players I believe are the most likely that could be moved before the roster freeze kicks in. We'll discuss all that coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, we have an NHL holiday roster freeze kicking in here in less than 48 hours. On December the 19th at midnight, the NHL rosters will be frozen and no transactions will be able to be made after that time until after the holidays. So not only could we likely see a few trades here before the roster freeze kicks in, you'll probably also see some younger players being assigned to the minors, etc., just to make sure they can get ample playing time, as a lot of these teams are going to have, an extended period of time off. For example, we saw the Senators send forward Jake Batherson back down to the minors after last night's game. So obviously that's going to give him a chance to play since they're going to be off for a period of time here over the holidays. So you're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff and potentially a small flurry of trades here. We did see a flurry of trade activity earlier this month, and I do think the potential exists to see another flurry of it here before this freeze kicks in. So let's jump in here to the top 5 players that are most likely, in my opinion, to be moved before this roster freeze kicks in. First up, we've got Jake Muzzin, defenseman for the Los Angeles Kings. Now, the Kings are a team we've talked quite a bit about here over really since the season began, because they've got off to a rough start. And obviously, all these teams that are having rough starts are surrounded by a lot of speculation on players they might trade or changes they may try to make to improve their clubs. I mean, he's a left shot defenseman. He's 29 years old. He still has, this year and next left on his contract. Pretty reasonable cap hit. He's been in the past at least a pretty proven 40-point defenseman. Moves the puck well. So I do think Jake Muzzin could be an attractive option to a lot of other teams. There's plenty of teams rumored to be looking to add to the defense corps here around the NHL. So it would not be a surprise at all to see Jake Muzzin wearing a new sweater come the new year. Currently, he has 13 points in 34 games for the Kings. But of course, a lot of these players' stats might be overlooked here because they're not playing on teams that are doing exceptionally well. And if the team as a whole isn't scoring a whole lot, it's certainly going to be impacting the individual's production and stats for sure. So I do think Jake Muzzin's a fairly attractive option on the LA Blue Line to be moved out, more so than like an Alec Martinez right now, because Martinez has been injured. So I do see Jake Muzzin as being the most attractive option there right now, at least. So I do think the potential exists. Like I said, come the new year here, he's going to be wearing a different jersey. Next up, we got Burakovsky of the Washington Capitals. Now, he's a 23-year-old pending RFA. Seems to have kind of fallen out of favor with the Capitals, not getting much playing time. He's been a healthy scratch. When he's been in the lineup, his playing time has been reduced. So it's certainly a player as well to keep your eye on. Like I mentioned before in a prior video, if Burakovsky is moved by the Capitals, I fully expect them to want a roster player in return. I don't think they'd be looking for a prospect or a draft pick or something like that. Capitals really do firmly believe that they can repeat as Stanley Cup champions. They obviously want to make another cup run here, so they want to make sure their roster is intact as deep as possible for a potential playoff run. So I do see them maybe looking to add on their defense core should they make a trade like that. We had mentioned the other day that Vancouver Canucks defenseman Ben Hutton, who's been surrounded by speculation of maybe being traded, might be an option, as the Canucks were apparently expressing interest in Burakovsky. But there are some other teams around the league that are certainly looking for some scoring and would certainly give the young forward a chance for sure. Like the Hurricanes are another team to look to. The Hurricanes are desperate for scoring right now, and they certainly have some valuable pieces on that back end that might be moved, which we're going to get into here momentarily, which is a perfect segue, I guess, to jump over to the Carolina Hurricanes defense core. And I do think the most likely one to be moved right now would be Pesce. He's a right shot defenseman. He's got a pretty reasonable contract. I believe he's got 5+ years left at just over $4 million. He's still relatively young at 24 years old. And the Hurricanes need help up front, and they've got lots of capable defensemen, including some guys in the minor leagues who can certainly take up a lot of those minutes. Now, leading into the season, we were kind of led to believe that Justin Faulk would be the most likely to be moved, and I still think that's a possibility. So I would kind of lump Faulk and Pesce kind of together on this option here right now, but I think throughout a lot of the speculation since the beginning of the year, Pesce's kind of caught the attention of a lot of other teams who realized they might be able to get a really steady rear guard who might be able to pair up with one of their offensive defensemen. Like at one point, he was speculated that the Leafs were interested if they had to end up moving Nylander. So obviously that never came to be, but it was rumored for a period of time there that Pesce was a guy that they were looking at. Should they consider making a deal with the Hurricanes? So a team like them who has offensive guys like Riley and Gardner, for example, he could potentially pair up with somebody like that to kind of offset and make it a stronger D pair on the defensive side of the puck. So we'll see. I do think Brett Pesce is an attractive option, like Muzzin, for many options here, many teams around the league. So we'll see. I do think it's a little bit less likely than a Muzzin, but the Hurricanes are desperate for scoring, and they really want to get into the playoffs here. New owner Tom Dunn's really pushing to get a better product on the ice and get some more results to get into the playoffs. So I don't see them waiting too long here to make a move. I'm kind of surprised, to be honest, that they haven't done something already. They've been carrying a lot of strong defensemen, and it's time to get something done. Next up, we got pending UFA with the Philadelphia Flyers, and that's Wayne Simmonds. Now, we've seen some other moves out of the Flyers organization here this week where they finally took the plunge and fired Dave Haxtell after that big chaotic 24-hour period where it looked as though he was fired, not fired, like whatever the case was. But he is now gone from the Flyers organization as head coach, at least. And obviously their AHL affiliate coach, Scott Gordon, has now taken over the reins. There was a lot of speculation around Joel Quenneville, which at this point at least proves to be untrue. Personally, I think the most likely scenario with Quenneville, if and when he gets back into coaching, is likely going to happen in the offseason. That's just my personal opinion. I think he's going to kind of survey the land here in the NHL, see what opportunities exist, and see which one might be the best fit. Obviously, he's not worried about anything from a financial standpoint. He's still collecting his high paychecks from the Chicago Blackhawks. He can certainly take his time with this, enjoy some time off, some downtime, some family time, get through the holidays, and maybe look at maybe get back into coaching in the NHL either later this year, potentially, most likely in the offseason is my guess here. But with the Flyers and Chuck Fletcher making some moves now, like I said before, it's been highly speculated that he's looking to make about 3 or 4 trades, and he'd like to get at least one done before the roster freeze. And I can see the Flyers being one of the more active teams here in the second half of the season before we get to the NHL trade deadline. Based on everything coming out of Philadelphia, personally, I think the most likely player to be moved would be Wayne Simmonds. Now, for a variety of reasons, but he's 30 years old. He needs a new contract. I don't see the Flyers giving him what he's likely going to want. His production is certainly down a bit this year. He's got, I believe it's 14 points in 33 games, I believe it is. So, he's certainly still capable of producing, certainly still capable of being an effective forward with the right team, but certainly needs to play probably a little bit lesser role than he has in the past. But based on what he's likely looking for a new contract, given his age, his health, etc., I see them more likely moving him. Now, that could be a deal that maybe waits for the deadline, but there's certainly plenty of teams around the league, like I mentioned, like Carolina, like a Boston, for example, who are looking to add on the offensive side of the game, and they may not want to wait till the deadline to make a move here. I mean, if you take a look at the standings right now, like, for example, in the East, there's a lot of options that are still open, but when you see teams like Toronto and Tampa and Buffalo having exceptional seasons, a team like Boston or Carolina in the Metro Division may not want to wait too long, because if the longer they wait, they get too far behind, and getting into that top 3 is going to be awfully difficult later into the season. They might be stuck with battling it out for a wild card and potentially risk missing. So I think some of these teams might be more aggressive sooner than later to make sure that they get this done and get them the best chance to get into the playoff hunt here. Now, the last name I want to mention today is a name I haven't talked about in quite some time, but it has kind of caught the attention of a lot of the insiders with TSN, and he's skyrocketed near the top of their trade bait list, and that's St. Louis defenseman Colton Parayko. Now, in the past here, we've talked about Captain Alex Pietrangelo potentially being available, and really we've also discussed with the Blues anything and everything at least being considered and on the table with general manager Doug Armstrong. Now, I do think to see some seriously big moves like a Tarasenko or something, I do think that's less likely to happen right now. That's probably a deal that would more likely happen at the draft or during the offseason. At least that's what I think. But for them to trade a guy like a Pietrangelo or a Parayko would not be a huge surprise, at least right now. I do think Colton Parayko would be an attractive option to many teams around the league. I mean, he's huge. He's 6'6". He's got a right shot defenseman. He's a good puck mover. He's proven to be a pretty reliable defenseman in the past. Now, he's not having the greatest year this year, but then again, you can say that pretty much about the bulk of the St. Louis Blues team, and I don't think you can really put that all on him. So I do think he'd be a valuable resource to kind of get rejuvenated should he get a fresh start and some new scenery to kind of get started in here. So I do think the possibility does really exist that Parayko not only is available, but you could see a team that's looking to be aggressive to make a solid pitch for him here over the next couple days and potentially land him onto their roster. I wouldn't rule out a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs, but at the same time, I don't really have any information to suggest that they're really actively going down that road. I think the Leafs and Kyle Dubas are more likely to be patient here and maybe make a move closer to the deadline once they get a better idea what they have. I think Dubas really wants to see this team that he has continuously improve throughout the regular season before he jumps the gun. He seems to be very patient that way. So I'd be surprised if Toronto was in on this, but at the same time, you can make an argument that Parayko would be a great fit in Toronto and would certainly upgrade their defense core significantly So I wouldn't rule it out, but at the same time, there's plenty of other teams around the league that are certainly looking for that type of defenseman, and they don't always become available very frequently. So it could end up in a situation where St. Louis might have multiple offers to consider. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, obviously, like I said, the Flyers are one of the teams I expect to be the most active. Hard to say if they'll get more than one deal done or any before the roster freeze. I mean, some of these trades may not actually happen before the freeze. This is just my opinion on which ones I think are the most likely that could get done here over the next 48 hours before that deadline kicks in. But I guess time will tell here. And any of these players who don't get moved, I would not be surprised to see them move later before the trade deadline here and before we get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. So we'll see. So certainly leave your comments down below. Let me know which of these players do you think are the most likely to be traded before the holiday roster freeze, or is there any other players around the NHL that you feel should be on this list as well? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below and we will continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here with all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up before you go. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.